instruments come at this time? And Valerie politely said, the instruments aren't coming, the instrumentalists are coming to play the instruments. Anyway, it's one of those things you learn. 2 Chronicles 25. Not a story or a character from the Bible that we read of or hear of very much. Kind of a nice name, but Amaziah. 2 Chronicles 25. And if you would, just because we're going to go there here in a minute, go ahead and also find 2 Kings 14. And we'll just read one verse from that, but maybe a couple verses. Same story, okay? You got the Kings and the Chronicles is kind of a retelling of that, but so you marked your place there in 2 Kings. Let me read 2 Chronicles 25. This is our text for tonight. I'm going to read the whole chapter here. A little bit lengthy, but try to follow along. I'll try to give not too much, hopefully, but a little bit of commentary as we go. Amaziah was 25 years old when he began to reign. Now, you and I think 25 years old is pretty young to run a kingdom, right? But consider this. His father, Joash, was 7 years old when he began to reign. So 25, man, he's got a lot more experience. 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name, they always mention this with the kings, his mother's name was Jehoiada of Jerusalem. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, but not with a perfect heart. Now it came to pass when the kingdom was established to him that he slew his servants that had killed the king his father. But he slew not their children, but did as it was written in the law of the book of Moses, where the Lord commanded, saying, the fathers shall not die for the children, neither shall the children die for the fathers, but every man shall die for his own sin. Moreover, Amaziah gathered Judah together, and made them captains over thousands and captains over hundreds, according to the houses of their fathers throughout all Judah and Benjamin. And he numbered them from 20 years old and above, and found them 300,000 choice men, able to go forth to war, and could handle spear and shield. He hired also 100,000 mighty men of valor out of Israel, for 100 talents of silver. Okay, so basically these are like mercenaries. Huh? Mercenaries, thank you. It didn't sound right to me. Mercenaries. And so what he's doing, because Israel at this point is just what is the title for the northern kingdom. All right, Judah is the title for the southern kingdom. If you remember, right, they're right now at odds. Okay, but apparently these mercenaries are in, they don't care. They're in Israel, but they don't really care what side they fight for. But hey, for the right price, we'll fight, on whichever side you want. That's the way I understand this, right? So he hires them for 100 talents of silver. Verse 7. But there came a man of God. We don't know who this prophet was or whatever he was, but he's a man of God, saying, O king, let not the army of Israel go with thee, for the Lord is not with Israel, to wit, with all the children of Ephraim. But if thou wilt go, do it, be strong for the battle. God shall make thee fall before the enemy. For God hath power to help and to cast down. So he's saying you can go to fight, but if you go ahead and you've paid these mercenaries, and if they go with you, you're going to fall in the battle, because God is not with them. So he listens to the advice in verse 9. Amaziah said to the man of God, but, now this was his concern. Now, I hear what you're saying. I want to obey God, but here's what he asked. What do we for the 100 talents which I have given to the army of Israel? He's like, I'm going to lose all that money. Yeah, I already paid them, but never mind. You can't come to battle with me, right? And the man of God answered, the Lord is able to give thee much more than this. Right? You obey God, he'll take care of you. That's good advice. Then Amaziah separated them, to wit, the army that was come to him out of Ephraim. to go home again, wherefore their anger was greatly kindled against Judah, and they returned home in great anger. They got their money, so you say, well, why are they angry? Well, some say that if they would have overtaken that city, they would have also got the spoils that go with that. So actually, they would have got a lot more money. So it was the money. Love of money is the root of all evil. So you can go figure that that's what would upset them. And Amaziah strengthened himself and led forth his people and went to the valley of Salt and smote the children of Seir 10,000. And other 10,000 left alive did the children of Judah carry away captive and brought them upon the top of the rock and cast them down from the top of the rock, and they were all broken in pieces. But the soldiers of the army which Amaziah sent back, that they should not go with him to battle, fell upon the cities of Judah, from Samaria even to Beth-horon, and smote 3,000 of them, and took much spoil. They're getting back at him, right? Well, we'll attack you instead. Now, it came to pass, after that Amaziah was come from the slaughter of the Edomites, that he brought the gods of the children of Seir, and set them up to be his gods, and bowed down himself before them, and burned incense unto them. Wherefore, imagine that, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Amaziah. And he sent unto him a prophet, which said unto him, Why hast thou sought after the gods of the people, which could not deliver their own people out of his hand? And it came to pass, as he talked with him, that the king said unto him, Art thou made of the king's counsel? Forbear. Why shouldest thou be smitten? Then the prophet forbare and said, I know that God hath determined to destroy thee, because thou hast done this, and hast not hearkened unto my counsel. Then Amaziah, king of Judah, took advice and sent to Joash, the son of Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, Come, let us see one another in the face. And Joash, king of Israel, sent to Amaziah, king of Judah, saying, The thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, Give thy daughter to my son to wife. And there passed by a wild beast that was in Lebanon, and trode down the thistle. Thou sayest, Lo, thou hast smitten the Edomites, and thine heart lifteth thee up to boast. Abide now at home. Why shouldest thou meddle to thine hurt, that thou shouldest fall, even thou, and Judah with thee? But Amaziah would not hear, for it came of God, that he might deliver them into the hand of their enemies, because they sought after the God of Edom. So Joash, the king of Israel, went up, and they saw one another in the face, both he and Amaziah, king of Judah, and Bethshemesh, which belongeth to Judah. And Judah was put to the worse before Israel, and they fled every man to his tent. And Joash, the king of Israel, took Amaziah, king of Judah, the son of Joash, the son of Jehoahaz, at Bethshemesh, and brought him to Jerusalem, and brake down the wall of Jerusalem from the gate of Ephraim to the corner gate, 400 cubits. And he took all the gold and the silver and all the vessels that were found in the house of God with Obed-Edom, and the treasures of the king's house, and the hostages also, and returned to Samaria. And Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, lived after the death of Joash, son of Jehoahaz, king of Israel, 15 years. Now the rest of the acts of Amaziah, first and last, behold, are they not written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel? Now, after that time, Amaziah did turn away from following the Lord. They made a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, but they sent to Lachish after him and slew him there. And they brought him upon horses and buried him with the father in the city of Judah. All right. Not the story necessarily that you've probably heard in Sunday school with flannel graph growing up, but an interesting story, and one that stuck out with me. And I'll mention the title in a minute and where we're going with this, but notice there at the very beginning of the chapter, in verse 2, the Bible says about Amaziah, and he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, but not with a perfect heart. as I said, the northern and the southern kingdoms are divided. You've got Israel in the north, Judah in the south. And here's what you find. Israel has got one bad king after another. I mean, every single one of them is bad. Judah, from the time of David, okay, after David you had Solomon, and then with his son Rehoboam is when the kingdoms was divided. Then you have like most of them are, some of them are good kings and some of them are bad kings, but they're all compared to David. And so they'll say, hey, this king did good and followed in the ways of his father David. Or, he did not follow the ways of his father David, and so it talks about being a bad king. But I read that in verse 2 there, and it says, Amaziah was a good king. And now it does admit that he wasn't a good king with a perfect heart, but it says he was a good king. And what we notice right away as we read that story, that there's a lot of negatives that we can see about Amaziah. For example, now this isn't in our text, and this is why I had you mark 2 Kings. Go there real quickly. 2 Kings chapter 14. I got First Kings. 2 Kings 14, look at verse 3. This is talking about the same guy, Amaziah. Verse 3 says, And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, yet not like David his father. He did according to all things as Joash his father did. Howbeit, the high places were not taken away. As yet the people did sacrifice and burnt incense on the high places. So what he was allowing to go on in his kingdom, and this is what a lot of the kings were doing that God reprimands him for, is that they were allowing people to continue these sacrifices up in the high places, as God had said not to do. In fact, it led to the worship of other gods, sacrificing unto other gods. In case you wonder, God doesn't care too much for that. Every single time the nations go after following after other gods, he compares that to adultery. He said, hey, you're supposed to be committed to me. We're supposed to be in a spiritual relationship under a covenant, and yet you're going after these false gods which you know can't do anything for you. You know they can't say, you know they're just dumb statues that can't do anything for you, but you, for whatever reason, follow after like the other nations and go after these gods. And so we see Amaziah here, that the first thing he did is he allowed, after he became king, it says he was a good king, but he still allowed these people to have their sacrifices. I talked about that this morning, not railing on him, but I talked about our president and how he said, churches are essential, but guess what? He still has to, because of his job description and all that, he still has to allow that mosques still meet and synagogues still meet and Buddhist monks still meet, and satanic temples, Wicca, you name it, whatever religion out there, he has to say, well, those can meet too. Those are essential too, right? But back in these days of these kings, godly kings, that were trying to follow the Lord, now they messed up a lot, but it wasn't like that. If you had a good king, let's say you got Josiah, somebody like that, or Asa, or somebody that comes on this kingdom, and they take over and they say, what is going on here? Sodomites in the land? Get them out of here. He comes on the scene and he says, these guys are going after other gods? Kill them and destroy the gods. They would go in and they would clean house. One guy, I think it's Josiah, even had to kick his mom out of office. She was his advisor, and he said, get lost. Right? It was rough, right? But they had to take a stand for God if they were going to rule the king. This is what God wanted. This is what pleased God. But most of the kings wouldn't do that. Most of the kings would say, well, I got to please the people, and those guys got to have their gods, and these guys have to have their idols and their groves, and whatever the case may be. So we see that Amaziah was no exception. He came in, tried to be a good king, tried to follow certain things, but we see that he allowed this to go on. Then we see that he hearkens to a man of God who says not to use these mercenary troops that he had hired, but then, he's all asking about the money. Well, what about this money I'm going to lose? What do I do about that? You see where his heart is, kind of. He wins the battle, and you see nowhere where he gives praise to God or anything like that. In fact, it seems to, as so often in the Bible, even David did the same thing. David's supposed to be this standard by which all these kings are measured. David did the same thing. He started winning battles, and I don't care who you are. I guess I better turn this on. I'm not a violent guy. I really don't think I love violence, right? But a good fight, men doing what men do, beating each other up. I mean, that's pretty. But I've never been in a war. And I've never shot anybody with a gun. I've never even shot an animal with a gun, right? I shot at a bird one time and later thought, man, if I would have killed that bird, I would have been really sad. All right, call me a wimp if you want to, but I'm just saying that's what happened. Okay? But I can imagine somebody that's in war, and we're talking about thousands of people dying, and you're shooting them, and you're shooting, back then they weren't shooting, I guess shooting with arrows. Cutting them to pieces with their sword. I mean, the Bible gets graphic on some of this stuff. And they're shooting them with their arrows and stabbing them with their spears. You think after a while, God would get kind of desensitized to the violence. And so you see this happen with David, and now you're going to see this happen with Amaziah, where this violence kind of gets to him, right? And you see there in the story how he took these, he went into the, they killed a lot of people in battle, but then he also uses this obsessive violence in verse 12. 2 Chronicles 25, verse 12. And other 10,000 left alive did the children of Judah carry away captive, and brought them upon the top of the rock, and cast them down from the top of the rock, that they were broken in pieces. I mean, you could have off with their head, they would have been dead. Just like that. You could have done anything you wanted, but they said, no, let's just take them up to this rock, cast them off, and watch them just break into pieces. You just get the sense that he's just given to violence, right, towards the end of his reign. And then it goes on. Next thing you know, he's not listening to the man of God anymore. And ultimately, in the end, he is hated and he's killed by his own subjects there in verse 27, 28. So why does the chapter start off saying he was a good man, and then show all these bad things that he did? And that's it. That's the whole story that we get from Amaziah. So what is this part about being good? Well, the only thing really we see in this chapter is what we see in verse 3 and 4. Okay? It says, now it came to pass when the kingdom was established to him that he slew his servants that had killed the king his father. Now let's stop there for a second. Was he wrong to kill the people that had killed his father? No. Because he was the king, and they were murderers, and he was executing judgment, which is what kings are supposed to do, and he was actually executing the death penalty on these people. That was not bad, right? And then we're going to go on to the next verse is more getting into the actual meat of the message. But go back to Genesis real quickly, if you will. Do you know that death penalty was established right after Noah got off the ark? I mean, there were some insinuations of what to do before that with Adam and Eve, or I should say with Cain and his offspring. But if you go to Genesis chapter 9, verse 5, this is God's commands to Noah after he gets off the ark, and he says, and surely your blood of your lives will I require, at the hand of every beast will I acquire it, and at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he man. So God established, hey, here is how you, in this new world that you're starting, right? Only 8 people alive in the world at this point, and a bunch of animals. In this new world that you're starting, here's the first law I'm going to give you. If somebody kills another person, now violence was really bad. That's one of the reasons God destroyed the earth. Men's thoughts were just continually violent. All right, that's why they were destroyed by the flood. And so he's saying, if a man kills another man, the punishment is that man's life will be taken. Right? That's a pretty good law. We still actually, for the most part, follow that in our nation today. Well, I mean, not very strictly, but it still is something that you'll see sometimes. If there's premeditated murder, somebody kills somebody, it might be 20 years, but they might get the death penalty for doing that, right? And that's something that's biblical. That's something that's right. Let me read a couple verses here about the responsibility of our government to enforce laws, to punish evildoers. Okay, 1 Peter. Or actually, first let's go to Romans 13. Romans 13. I mean, what is the government's job? Romans chapter 13, verse 1 says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God. And they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil." You see, the concept there is that the government's job is to punish the evildoers. Now, if you love the Lord and you love, people, and you're not trying to break laws and all that, you're just trying to do what's right, you probably don't have to worry about the government coming and executing you and punishing you by the sword. Nowadays they just fine you. That'll solve everything. Fine you. You don't want to go to jail? Okay, I'll tell you what, just pay this fine and you can get released. But no, they would punish the evildoers, severely punish them. And that was right. That was justified. That was not a bad thing to do. So somebody will say, okay, well, what if the government tells you, to do something that's contrary to God? Well, I tell you what, you got to obey God rather than man. And guess what? If you're obeying God rather than man, your intent is to do good. The government's job is to punish the evildoer. Your intent is to do good. Now, if you get punished for doing good, the Bible says rejoice. You're trying to follow God. You're trying to do what's right. If the government comes and punishes you for that, hey, I'm going to obey God rather than man. But if you're doing evil and the government comes to punish you for that, hey, you better take it. And if you are, like I said, if you are trying to do good, you're doing the good thing, and you know that, hey, this is against the law. All right, tell Daniel not to pray to his God. And he says, well, I'm going to pray anyway. Well, if you're going to obey God rather than man, then you need to be willing to accept the punishment from the government who thinks that you're doing evil, because that's their job, is to punish evil. Now, I know there's corrupt government and everything, but I'm saying you obey God, and if your motive is to do right, then you don't have to worry about that. And so don't let anybody take this verse out of context and say, look, you're just supposed to always obey the government no matter what. No, you're supposed to always obey God no matter what. But you can expect the government, their job is to punish the evildoers. So if they have it in their mind that something is evil, like breaking the speed limit law, then they're going to enforce that. And if you break the speed limit law, you better be willing to pay the fine. All right? And, and so forth. Obviously, that's a minor incident. Look at 1 Peter now. 1 Peter chapter 2. First Peter chapter 2, look at verse 14. Let's start at 13. Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man, for the Lord's sake. Whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors, those who would enforce the laws, who he's talking about, as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of them that doeth well. For so it is the will of God, that with well-doing you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. And so you see there again, the government's job is to punish the evildoers, okay, and with the sword. So at some point, it might become necessary for them to kill somebody, or you put them to death because the crime was so severe. And that's what happened here in this kingdom. A lot of times a king would come in, and immediately they would say, okay, who needs to be put to death? You remember whenever David was passing the kingdom off to Solomon, he sat down on his deathbed basically and gave some last words to Solomon. He started listing all these people. Hey, I promised so-and-so I wouldn't do it, so I didn't put this person to death, but you know what's the right thing to do, so go ahead and do it. He kills Joash, he kills some other different people. And so that's something they did. When you hand off the kingdom to the next person, you say, okay, these people need to be put to death. Now we do something kind of the opposite. Like when you're handing the kingdom off, that person gets to do a presidential pardon. And so they're like, well, I'm leaving, so I'm just going to pardon all these people, that committed all these crimes. And so that's kind of backwards, right? But this is the job of the government, to punish evildoers. Now, here's what he did. Back to 2 Chronicles chapter 25. He slew the servants that had killed the king his father. Verse 4. But he slew not their children, but did as it is written in the law in the book of Moses, where the Lord commanded, saying, the father shall not die for the children, neither shall the children die for the fathers, but every man shall die for his own sin. If you want to check that out, it's Deuteronomy 24:16, but I'm not going to go there now. But Deuteronomy 24:16 is where he gives this commandment. And basically what he's saying is, when you're punishing somebody, you're not going to take the children and punish them just because the father did something wrong. Now that doesn't mean that God won't allow a punishment to affect somebody's children. Innocent people die all the time because of punishments that God enforces upon nations. Innocent people die. God has allowed that to be the case. But he's saying, when you're doing judgment and you're executing judgment on somebody, we've talked about this before. I used this analogy last time, and I said the Statue of Liberty has a blindfold on it. No, it's not the Statue of Liberty. It's Lady Justice is what I meant to say. Lady Justice has a blindfold on it because justice is supposed to be blind. I don't care who you are. I'm just going to judge you based on whether you did wrong or whether you did right. If you did right, I don't care how much I might hate you, or somebody else, or my people might hate you. You're free. If you did bad, I don't care how much you want to pay me, how much letting you off the hook would advance my career. I'm going to look at you and say, this is what you deserve because you did wrong. That's justice, okay? That is executing just proper judgment. And so he said the children shouldn't be punished for that. And it appears to me, from what we see in the written record, that's the one thing he did that was good. I'm going to obey God on this, and I'm not going to put these children to death. Now later he throws some kids, he has some kids thrown off of a rock. I don't know if they're kids, but and destroyed. But when he began his kingdom and he executed the judgment like he was supposed to, and he killed the murderers, he said, well, I'm not going to kill these children. They didn't do anything wrong. So real quickly, I want to give you 3 points that we can learn from this that I think are significant and the right application. And the title of the message is Children Dying for Their Fathers. Don't get nervous, I'm just now announcing the title, but I am almost done. Children dying for their fathers. Okay, and the first, I'm just going to give you 3 points, and they're just going to go down into like looser applications. The first application is really simple. It's this: don't kill the enemy's children in war. Okay, don't kill the enemy's children. Literally, that's what's going on. This happens all the time. I don't care how far back you go. It's in the Bible. We see it. You can go back to other wars and all throughout our history, and you see that this happened. By the way, it happens today. Wars being fought on the other side of the world, and people are being killed simply because they're the children of somebody else. Okay? Innocent children being killed in times of war. Now, sometimes this happens. Sometimes it's necessary to happen in war. I'm not saying it's good, but sometimes it happens. In fact, sometimes, the way that they fight wars now, they will strap a bomb. I say this is what I've heard, okay? But they'll strap a bomb on a child, and they will say, hey, go over to that guy, right? And they probably convince them that you're going to get to go to heaven if you do this, or you're going to get to see your mom that died, or whatever. I don't know what they're convincing them, but they say, go over there to that man, or to that group of people, and you're a little kid, so they'll take you in and say, oh, are you okay? And then when you go in there, pull this bomb and blow yourself up and blow all of them with you. And so, naturally, you fight in a war where you see all these children standing in the middle of the street. A lot of them are going to end up dying because people think that by killing that child, we're saving other lives. But look, that's a terrible tragedy of war. I wasn't around during this time, but I've been told that when a lot of guys came back from Vietnam War, they were called baby killers. Now, I don't know all the story. I only see like what they show you in the movies and the documentaries and stuff like that. But I can guarantee you, there were some wicked men that probably took advantage of that and probably killed some innocent young kids in time of war. Some probably killed them on accident. Some probably killed him because they thought that, hey, that kid has been trained how to shoot and he's going to kill us. And so, look, it's a natural thing. Not natural, it's not a good thing at all, but it is true that in time of war, innocent people die. Wives that didn't do anything wrong die in a bombing. Children that didn't do anything wrong. And I understand that for the most part, what we've been told is that our government does what they can to try to avoid those kinds of things now, but it's inevitable. Sometimes that's going to happen. But anybody who would intentionally kill them just because, hey, we're fighting against Muslims, that kid's a Muslim, let's just bomb them and let God sort it all out. I've heard guys say that kind of stuff. I heard a preacher, actually a clip of a preacher that got up and he's talking about how he prays for all these ragheads to be killed and all this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, really? I mean, seriously, like, here's what you're saying, is that I've been told that these people want all Christians to die and then they're going to kill Christians. Now, that might be true. There's a lot of them. That's in the Quran, okay? So I understand that. This is a weird battle that they have to fight right now, but you're going to say that just everybody who's a Muslim is somebody that you want to die? No, that's wicked. That's not right. That's not right. A lot of Muslims, are getting saved right now and actually converting to Christianity. For whatever reason, God is using guys to be able to reach some of these people, and they're turning from that. And so one of the things, just the simple application is just in time of war, our nation should, if they're going to allow innocent parties, particularly children, to die just because of their relation to somebody else and not really care about that, then that's wicked. I mean, if somebody actually is in war and they shot a child on accident, I would, that person's forgiven. They didn't mean to do it. It's part of war. But I pretty much guarantee if that's a righteous person, they're going to live with the rest of their life with PTSD. They're going to be having nightmares all the time. And I know guys like that, okay? And they've seen stuff like that happen. It should be a wicked thing. But anyone that would find joy out of that is wicked. Okay, but that leads me to my next point. Now, that's the pretty cut and dry, clear thing here. You're in war. Don't shoot these innocent children just because you don't like their parents. But let's go now a little bit more looser illustration. Application. Don't hate somebody because you hate their family or their culture, or you hate, something about that person for whatever. I don't like that. I don't like the accent. That person's a Yankee. That person's, you know what I'm talking about? You've heard the stories about the Hatfields and the McCoys. First time I ever heard that, shows my ignorance on this kind of thing, but now I see it all the time. You're watching Andy Griffith or something like that, and you got these feuds and stuff like that. But the first time I ever heard it was at Southwest. They had an attendance campaign for the bus ministry. And they had, one team was the Hatfields and one team was the McCoys. And you had to get how many riders that you could get to attend the services. And it was just all in fun, so they did a lot of skits where they were dressed up like hillbillies and it was just a lot of fun. That's where I learned what Hatfields and McCoys were. But these were two families that, I don't even know if it was true, or if it was just kind of a legend, but these two families that were fighting for years and years and years. And really, when it came down to it, nobody even knew why they were fighting. Yeah. And as the story goes, people from one side, young people were making friends on the other side, boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden, they were forbidden to, like that person because that's a Hatfield, that's a McCoy. And they didn't even know why they didn't like each other. And that sounds funny, but you know what? That's how so many of us are today. It can be so easy to fall into that where you're just like, that's that family. That's those people on that other side of the tracks. That's the people that are of that nationality, or they speak that language. I remember for some reason it became real popular, and I understand that frustration, real popular to say, this is America. These Mexicans need to come over here. They need to learn English. I understand that. I hate person one to speak English, okay? I should be able to speak English. I'm in America. I understand what you're saying on that. But if somebody carries that over, and it happens, all right, where all of a sudden they're in a line at the grocery store and somebody in front of them is speaking Spanish, and all of a sudden they just start treating them like dirt. You need to get out of here, you foreigner, blah, blah, this, blah. That's ridiculous, and that's wicked. Right? Those people, you don't know anything about them. To hate them because of their nationality or their family, where they came from, how they spoke, guess what that's called? Racism. Right? That's a bad thing, okay? There's no reason to hate somebody because of that. But it even happens, to somebody who just hates, the family that they came from or whatever. I'll tell you another, something I thought about as sort of an example for this. Maybe this would have went under the other point, I don't know, but have you ever heard this, like the debate about abortion, whether a lady should have a right to have an abortion or not, and some will argue, well, I don't necessarily believe abortion is okay, but in the occasion that a woman gets raped by somebody, and then she's pregnant with that rapist child, and so now the rest of her life she's going to be seeing this kid and thinking about this guy that raped her, I think she should be allowed to have an abortion. Which I think, number one, from what I understand, that hardly happens at all. Okay, so using that as an argument to allow abortion is ridiculous. Number two, that innocent child in the womb, not their fault. It's a terrible thing, but if a person's coming at it at a Christian worldview, if God allowed that baby to be born in the womb, right, He knows what He's doing. He allowed that to happen for a reason. And so just to hate a baby because of the man that was involved in putting that baby in there would be a very bad thing. And so just another application, very important to God. It's like how the Bible talks about love covering a multitude of sins. Here's a guy who I read this and say he's kind of a wicked king. But God starts off by saying he was a good king. He didn't have a perfect heart, but he was a pretty good king. Why do you say that, God? Well, He did spare those children that didn't do anything wrong. It makes me think of Jesus, just the way He loved children, put them on His lap, and they would try to say, hey, get these kids out of here. Kids are supposed to be seen and not heard. And Jesus said, whoa, 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 suffer the kids to come unto me. And so he did have a heart for the children. Now, the third application is even looser than that. All right, so don't hate somebody because of their family. I would go a step farther and say this. Don't judge somebody based on the conditions that are out of their control. That is to say that somebody who doesn't know any better than to do what they're doing, right? That's a person that needs to be given a chance. Now, I'm not saying let them get away with doing whatever that they want to do. We need to judge behaviors, okay? So if somebody does wrong, they need to be punished for that or whatever. But here's what I'm saying. When you walk up to somebody and you see the lifestyle they're living and you say, oh, that person, here's the types of things you hear. Oh, that person's white trash. Oh, that person, is a gangbanger. Oh, that person is whatever. And you start labeling these people and you start judging them based on something that you don't know anything about. All you know is that they were raised in a circumstance that we have never seen. Praise the Lord. We have never seen some of the conditions that maybe they are in. We were brought up a little differently. We were raised in a different time. We were raised with different set of circumstances. We should never look on that person and say, oh, look at those people, right? Just because of the lifestyle that they're living or whatever. When we're giving the gospel to somebody, and there are some people that will refuse to give the gospel to, certain communities, certain neighborhoods. Our missionaries to the Middle East. Let's just put it that way. Some things you're not supposed to say where people online can hear. Our missionaries in the Middle East, okay, that we know of. Where was I going with this?
Not give the gospel.
Okay, yeah, thank you. What was that again?
Not give the gospel.
Okay, yeah, thank you. They are on deputation. I'm doing so good up to this point. They are on deputation. Okay, deputation. If you don't know, missionaries will go around. They'll try to raise support. They'll travel the country, go to these different churches and share their ministry and say, "Hey, would you like to support us?" And so these missionaries would go to these different churches, and if you got to a certain areas were worse than others, and if you would go there and they found out that you were going to a Muslim country and you're going to preach the gospel. I mean, this was right when the war was really bad. The whole 9/11 was still fresh on people's minds, and they had all these thoughts and these hatred towards this people group and all that stuff. And there were churches that were saying, why would you take the gospel to them? Right? Now, that seems like a pretty extreme case, but it's like that. There are neighborhoods where people don't want to go. People want to go plant a church somewhere. You know what they typically do? They go find a nice part of town, and they try to raise enough money to get a nice, beautiful building in a nice part of town where everything is clean and everything is nice and neat and it smells good, and only a certain type of people are going to come to. You don't think that happens? You better look around at church planners. That's where they're starting, and they send something out and say, hey, this is going to cost me a couple $1 million, but it's just the ideal. You don't understand this. This is a hard neighborhood to reach, and they have a little bit more money, and so they're harder to reach. Now, I'm not condemning everybody who is a missionary or planting churches in these fields. I'm just saying this is what I see a lot of times, and I'm saying, hey, how come I'm not getting letters? Now, you do have people going to these areas, but you don't see the same extent of people saying, hey, we're going right into the middle of the ghetto, and we're going to reach some souls for the Lord. We're going to plant something there. You don't see that very often. Why? Because they don't want to mess with that side of the tracks. They don't want to mess with that people group. They've got preconceived ideas, that in my opinion aren't any worse than some of these guys. I was just starting to rail on Bill Gates a little bit, but some of the things that he said in regards to vaccinations and population growth and all this kind of stuff. And he's basically said that if we can vaccinate a certain group of people and get them healthy, they will have less children. In some of these other neighborhoods where all these people, they're having tons of children and stuff, they'll just kind of cease to exist. They'll get sick and they'll die. He didn't say it quite like that, but you read between the lines and that's what they're talking about. Okay? And then how about I can't remember her name, but the lady that started the whole abortion thing. Yeah, that one. Okay? She originally said about poorer communities, and I think specifically mentioned probably black communities and stuff like that. And she basically said that abortion was good because of the fact that it was getting rid of these types of people. And now we look at that as Christians and say, how wicked somebody be like that? How wicked somebody not have love for these people? And I want to say, as a Christian and as a preacher and somebody who has a desire to see souls saved, how dare us not go into communities and give the gospel to people just because of some things, some conditions that they're in, that we just have never been in those conditions. We don't understand it, right? Some poverty, a sense of poverty that I've never had to experience. You know, when we were in the bus ministry in Oklahoma City, there were houses that we would go into that we would literally gag because of the smell. And we didn't want to, and we tried everything we could not to. You know, and you go into some of the places and they offer you a drink and you're kind of like, I don't know, right? But for us to say, I'm not going to that neighborhood, that's wicked. That's wicked, because everybody needs the gospel, and we should never be the judge of who should get the gospel and who shouldn't get the gospel. We should never be the judge when somebody comes into the church and decides they want to be discipled, they want to hear about the Bible. We should never judge them and say, nah, that person, look at him. I mean, look at her. They're never going to grow. They're never going to get this. You know, they need to go to other church downtown. No, they need to go where the gospel's preached and where people love them. Amen. And so we've got to be mindful of these things. And this is the problem with some independent Baptists, and I'm glad to be an independent Baptist, proud of it, but some groups within what we would call independent Baptists, some groups have just got to where they just label everybody reprobate, and they just, everybody, that person unreachable, and that person's, they're all wicked, and they're dying, they're going to hell, and I'm thinking, yeah, but you need to go give them the gospel. You need to go give them a chance to hear the gospel, give them a chance to taste what you received so long ago that you kind of forgot about where you were and where God brought you from. And the whole world needs to know. We shouldn't be the judges of that. All right, just 3 simple applications. Children not dying for the fathers. Lord, we thank you. Pray, Lord, that you help us to reach this community, reach the communities up there in Kansas City and Johnson County and Wyandotte County and all these places that we're going, knocking doors, seeing souls saved, Lord, hearing the gospel and choosing to call on you. I pray that you help us continue to reach them, express to them their importance of discipleship and getting them baptized and helping them grow in knowledge of your word. I pray that you raise up laborers, Lord. Help us to be able to embark on this great job that you've given us of reaching the world. I pray that you would help us to be able to do that to the best of our ability, that you be honored and glorified in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, let's all stand.